Hey traders, Cousin Vinny coming to you on May 26, 2014 with a look at the week ahead. This is a chart from Doug Short at advisorsperspectives.com, noting margin. And you can see where we had peaked before in 2007, around May, June, and then we had the sell-off. And also in March, April of 2000, where we also had another sell-off in the markets. The blue line is the S&P 500. Now the markets are at highs, and I'm concerned that we could be seeing a double top here in the next couple of weeks. This is a weekly chart of the composite. Note that MACD is turning somewhat, and we see MACD histogram. Moving to the industrials, we can see that from these pivots up to this high, that we're moving sideways. The 20 period moving average. This is 20/40 weekly charts that I'll be reviewing the next few charts. The 20/40 weekly, we can see prices moving sideways, testing these highs. Now we could break out here, in which case I would change my bias short term. However, I'm watching prices as they move sideways, and it's giving me no indication that I need to step up my bullish bias currently. The New York Stock Exchange Composite continues to grind along the 20 period, showing no signs of letting up. MACD is moving sideways, so continuing to watch what's happening on the major averages. The comp put in a nice candle on the week. Do note the 20 period is rolling over. If this comes back down and bounces off like we did see here back in 2012, then we could see a continuation of this rally. But being it is May, going into June, July, August, I just don't see what the catalyst would be for institutions to get heavily involved. So that's my thesis right now, and that could change if we got back above the 20 period moving average. But then I would expect that we could be testing this uptrend line here, or stocks in the components. Note MACD histogram. The S&P 500 trying to test that recent high, but not quite getting there. MACD continues to drift lower, showing signs that it might try to cross over, but again, being it's May, June, I don't want to be repeating myself too much, but that's keeping me pretty much on the sidelines. TNX, we're holding above this level that we put in back in 2010. The lows, highs here. We have support, and for now that is support. But note the 20/40 is crossing over, so that starts to show a change in trend and the possibility that while everyone's expecting and talking about the Fed increasing interest rates, that we could see just the opposite happen. So MACD is continuing to point down. I'm following that quite closely. ARCA Institutional Index did put in a new high. This is the 75 stocks that most institutions have as their core equity positions in their portfolios, and something you should keep an eye on, in my opinion. Now, if you have stockcharts.com, you can just enter this symbol. If you don't have stockcharts.com, you can go to StockTwits and enter the symbol. And I had StockTwits started the page back in August of last year. They were kind enough to do that, and since then I've been posting charts to that section, so you can pull that up fairly readily and find out what the thoughts are on XII. AGG, this is the benchmark that many bond funds use, geared towards stock funds in your 401k and IRA and so forth. So you can see that this continues on a bullish bent. We're above highs. We had a 20 period, 40 period moving average crossover on the weekly, and MACD continues to point higher. So for the time being, this looks bullish. We could see a pullback and create a cup and handle situation and then a move higher, or we could just see this fail here in a double top territory if interest rates do start to get shaken up this week and during the summer. I just don't see it currently. IEF, the 7-10-year Treasury bond fund, bullish as well. We had a downtrend, we had a crossover on the weekly, and we continue to see our prices moving higher. The TLT weekly chart, we can see the Kirby that prices are right above We do have some selling volume up here, but for the most part we had a crossover back in February, March, and since then we've just continued to move higher along the upper Bollinger Band, which I don't have displayed here, but we continue to move higher, and we did see a test of this trend line. Note the wick here on the candle, and we closed above that low on the weekly. So that's a good sign if you're still bullish in bonds. So if this breaks down and gets back down below this trend line, I would likely liquidate my position in bonds, 50% or so, and start to consider taking some trades elsewhere in my 401k. But this is a longer term trade, so I'm comfortable currently with TLT and the benchmark AGG, which is more bullish looking than this chart. Okay, so shifting to the daily charts, this is a NASDAQ Composite daily. We can see the Bollinger Bands are enabled here, and we're back above the 50-period moving average, the blue line here. And prices have closed above the upper Bollinger Band with the bullish percent of the comp bouncing off of a buy zone. We have NAMO in a sell zone, MACD crossing, NASI crossing, the summation index for the NASDAQ. And we can see the number of stocks trading above their 50-period moving average is quite low at 35.48%. So that's of some concern. We're at high, we're breaking out here, and we don't have a great deal of participation. Prices on the Bollinger Band are at the upper range, so I'd look for this to move back down like we saw here off of the upper Bollinger Band, as 95% of price action is contained within the Bollinger Bands and 99% are contained within the third standard deviation, which we're getting close to currently. So keep that in mind, that the likelihood of it continuing to move higher is less than the likelihood that we'll move back into the mean reversion back to the moving average, the 20 period, the center line of the Bollinger Bands. This is a weekly chart of gold. We did come down. We're basing in a sideways range and can continue to grind along the 20 period moving average on the weekly. Note the MACD looks like it's trying to cross over, so we'll watch what happens at the signal line here. This is a chart of the NASDAQ 100. Note that we're at the upper Bollinger Bands and Keltner channel here, the magenta line. The 200 period moving average is marching higher. However, note the volume is tapering off as we're making new these recent highs here. So that is some concern. We are above the Kirby level, and something to consider as Bollinger Bands continue to expand. I would expect that we're more than likely going to move back at some point in the near future, being this is the summer. This is a chart of the Nikkei. If you follow the Japanese stock market at all, you can see that on a monthly basis this trend line has held and Bollinger Bands are starting to compress. So the volatility is starting to leak out of the Japanese markets as we see these Bollinger Bands continue to compress with a MACD cross on the monthly. So I'm thinking continued weakness. We do have the 20 period marching up to meet prices. This is a chart of the Russell daily. Note the pivots, this high and this low, the 382 retracement. Prices are coming back to test that level that they tested once before. We note the crossovers here may occur on the 1030. So keep an eye on those, and the 382 going into the week with slow stow also in overheated territory, but MACD has crossed and moving higher. I would look for momentum to pick up if this is going to continue to move higher. The Russell strength to the S&P 500 is this chart here, and of course CCI is on a buy signal on the daily. This is a chart of the S&P Composite 1500 index. Note the sideways range, and note that the declining stocks percent that were back above this level, got above the 20 period moving average, the blue line, and are breaking this trend line which I drew in last week. Also note that the up-down volume percent, which favors small and mid-cap stocks since there's more of them, the percent of stocks trading more volume are continuing to move above the 20-period moving average and higher. So I'm watching these two indicators as well. And one of the last things I wanted to point out is that we've been following this indicator, the staples versus cyclicals. You want to see cyclicals outperforming staples as a ratio when the market and stocks are doing better. So we did break that higher low last week. So we'll watch to see if this bounces or if this continues to move downward. If this continues to move down, I would suggest possibly focusing more on cyclical stocks. So we'll be watching XLU, XLV, and XLP, the defensive sectors, to see if more money flows out of those sectors going into the summer. Note Rambus has been consolidating along the 50-period moving average here. We'd just like to see some volume. Note MACD is crossing. MACD is turning and could cross in the near future, and Stochastics is leading that move currently. So a nice consolidation pattern here after a nice move off of the 8 level. We ran up, consolidated, now I'm expecting a move higher. You could wait for this to break above this previous high to take a trade, be more safe, but this is also a trade off the lower trend line as well as a breakout of the trend line, expecting that prices will surge to a certain point to the upper Bollinger Band, then probably retest the upper trend line here. Note all of the sector ETFs that showed up on the Bollinger Band scan, the technology sector, okay, the healthcare sector, materials. Keep an eye on those. The semiconductors, many of these showed up. The growth shares, S&P 500 iShares. That's something to be focused on, and the names therein. I noted that the airlines are also doing quite well. Delta, if we take a look at that chart, continues to grind higher. Note the Keltner channel is pointing higher. All the MAs are moving higher. MACD is bouncing here at the 0 line, and Stochastics is pointing higher. If we look at SAVE, Spirit Airlines, back above the 20 period after a period of consolidation. American Airlines testing a high. Stochastics turning higher. Southwestern at highs. We pointed this out last week and the week before that we bounced off of the shorter term 10 period EMA and continued to move higher. MACD is cruising higher and Stochastics is overbought. Ryanair, a little bit of a choppy chart there. MACD cross. Hawaiian Airlines, we had an activist investor in this name, so watching these levels here break above the 1541 level would be a continuation of the trend, which is up. Note the 200 period, the 50 period, and so forth. Alaska Air, one that Mikey likes to trade a lot, testing those recent highs. Keltner channels are pointing higher, 200 periods pointing higher. MACD's moving sideways, Stochastics is turning up. Remember, materials were looking pretty good, so let's take a look at Alcoa. Looking okay. Tight Bollinger Bands is going to move one way or another shortly. Delphi, I believe, looked pretty decent. Breakout. We're testing these recent highs. Watch for a triple top rejection or a triple top breakout. Note MACD cross. Got the momentum. We have the volume as well. So watch Delphi and the auto industry in general, being that they are a big provider. Auto Parts, another name. ELV, similar to Delphi in a chart pattern. Building materials, remember, let's take a look at USG, gypsum. Draw a trend line. We break above that trend line. It could be a nice trade for several days up to this upper Bollinger Band, upper Keltner channel here. MACD's crossing. So if you think the builders are going to start doing better spring and summer months, obviously there's more building that happens, so you could see USG after a long consolidation period a trend break and move to the upside, that a longer term trade Could see back up to highs of 36 at some point in September, October, November. Dow Chemical, a lot of chemical names are doing better. Note the breakouts here on Huntsman. This was a trade back in here when the Bollinger Squeeze, the name showed up on the Bollinger Band Squeeze. We had this run up and a move sideways, consolidation. Now we're breaking higher. So looks like this could continue higher on Huntsman, as well as Dow, which is on the list as well. Breaking a multi-top, basically a sideways range. Base and break, you trade the breakout, whichever direction it occurs, upside or downside. In this case, looks like MACD is going to turn up and we're going to break out to the upside. Prices are above the Keltner channel. Poly 1, commodity chemicals, nice sideways range. MACD's crossing. We could use some volume though. Note the large volume bar here. I'm not sure if that was earnings or not, but make sure you check earnings on all of these. Select Medical Holdings. I noted that that chart looked decent. Had a nice Bollinger Band squeeze here, breaking out above the upper Keltner channel. So this is likely the third standard deviation. So prices should come back into this candle, which might be a good entry level for a continuation of Bollinger Bands, running the bands higher. Note the volume. MACD's certainly turning and may cross. And we got stochastics setting up as well. Nabors Industries, I believe that chart looked okay. Healthcare, Eli Lilly, some of these names looked well. Testing a previous high. Cypress Semiconductor, a name I like to trade when it's in a good setup. This is pretty much sideways for the most part. Let's take a look at the weekly, see how that looks. Yeah, weekly is a little bit clearer. You can draw a trend line and see that we're probably going to test that trend line in the near future. Stochastics is set up and turning, and MACD is turning higher as well. So it's a choppy chart, not one I'd probably want to trade, but still looks decent. F5 Networks, I thought that one looked okay. At the top, Bollinger Band, nice volume, and MACD cross. Prices are trying to get back above the Kirby. That could launch prices higher if it does get up there. Corning, nice sideways pattern after a nice move higher for the most part of the year. MACD looks like it wants to cross. Okay, let's take a look at the high tight flag scan. Another auto name, Auto Canada, trading on the Toronto Exchange, breaking out here. Looks like it's going to continue above the upper Bollinger Band, so I'd expect this to maybe pull back in a bit, but MACD's crossed and volume looks pretty good there. Build-A-Bear we talked about. MACD's crossing to the upside. Another Toronto name. I'm not sure what these guys do, but it had quite a nice gap there. China Plastics. This shows up on a number of different people's charts. The weekly chart on this one is a week 1, 2, 3 breakout. So I'm looking for consolidation here on China Plastics. I'm not crazy about these names, but note the volume. And MACD continues to cruise higher. So momentum is definitely there. So when this comes out, the momentum comes out of this name, it could drop pretty hard. So just keep that in mind. Concordia Healthcare, Canadian stock on the Toronto Exchange. Cirrus Energy, India bullish shares 3 times. Index continues to show bullishness instead of selling on the news as we expected. Emerged Energy, name that's been on the list for several weeks now on this breakout of the Bollinger Band and this flag sideways. Goodrich Petroleum moving sideways. This is starting to get a little sloppy now. Hugo Royalty Trust continues to move higher. This has been on the scan for several weeks now. Back here was on the Bollinger Band scan and it just took off to the races. I'm not sure what this, it's a read obviously, but continue to move higher. Interphase, looking for a flag here now after a nice move higher from March, April over the past 60 days. Kelso, Kingsway Financials, trades on the Toronto Exchange as well as the US. Note the near double in record time. Less than 60 days is part of the criteria of a high tight flag. And then you want to see a flag over the next week or so before a move higher. RadNet continues to flag higher on the 10 period EMA. This is the name we took back in this area here, and continues to look good. MACD is crossing. Stochastics is somewhat set up, so we're watching that name. Our stops are down below the 20 period moving average, so we have some room to run. VTNR continue to move sideways, sloppy pattern, but if it does break out above these levels 919, this could continue. MACD is starting to cross. Okay, so that's going to do it for me. This is Cousin Vinny coming to you from theclosingprint.com. Be sure to come and check us out at the Day Trader Bootcamp. There's a lot of strategies on here for new traders if you're interested. These top 3 videos will give you a good sense of how to trade. If you're a new trader, or if you follow me or Mikey or a few other people that use these techniques, IBD, Investors Business Daily, the CAN-SLIM method, along with swing trading on a longer term basis, you want to check out these 3 videos. It might help you a great deal. And also check out my blog, where I post quite a bit of I post the scans weekly, typically every day, so you can check this out as well. You can subscribe right here. Just put in your email and click subscribe. If you don't like what you see, you can come back and just click unsubscribe and get off the list. But for the most part, I post a list of stocks that we're looking at for the week, for the day, and what I'm thinking in terms of long or short. Okay? Take care. I hope this helps, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.